I wanted to move tack now, and we're kind of halfway through, so it's quite
Oh,
nice.
okay.
But
Yes, yes.
um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the second thing that you shared on that audio, which was talk about what you know, and
Yeah,
you've kind of hinted about this again, and this again. I mean, two very simple things. First thing, rapport. Second thing, sharing what you know. So powerful for me. Like when I started to do this, I used to embarrassingly try and be Jamie or try and be Kathy or try and be Keith or use Garrett's words. Everything that I heard, and everyone shares it in their own way.
yeah,
And when I heard you say, "Well, just share what you know," I
yeah,
went back, and I still do this, to my very first insight that I had about the principles. I still to this day share that insight,
yeah.
and it's still impactful now. And yet, up until then, I'd been grasping around for the words of how do I share this understanding. So, could you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure that would be very impactful for the coaches who are listening.
So, yes. Okay, so I want to share a funny story about me getting caught up in the same way. And these in the very early days of the understanding that's become the principle. So around 1983, and in the San Francisco Bay Area of California, there were a few of us had heard Sydney Banks or were talking with one another and teaching and understanding. And I was listening to George Pransky. He was one of the people that we were meeting with. And he's full of metaphors. Can just come up with so many metaphors. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, that's how you teach this understanding. You've got to learn how to do metaphors. Honestly, that's how I was thought I needed to teach. I honestly went to a bookstore to look up on a book on how to teach metaphors. So you see, I was lost in the same thing. Unfortunately, I found the book, uh, but it didn't last very long because I didn't have the energy of me behind it. You see, I said, oh, this is too much work, memorizing metaphors. Anyhow, I just wanted to share we're all in this human condition. We're all comparing. And what I realized deeper in about the last 5 years is that you want to just share what you know, what you have seen. You've been blessed, really, to see something about how we have a human experience and probably something deeper about the spiritual nature of us, and what we're a part of. And you have your own little insight into it, your own realization about it. And I just want to support you in sharing that that's enough. That's it. That's enough. And the reason is this: when you share from what you know, the minute you share from what you know, if you're not doing it as a technique, you're already in the feeling of the spiritual energy. The minute you share it, you're back in that feeling, and that's where the power comes from. It doesn't come from what you're sharing. The power comes from what you're sitting in when you share. You get that? That's the big piece to see. So if you're trying to be somebody that you admire in the three principles world, you're not going to be in that feeling. You're going to be trying to imitate. That's one step away from the feeling. So that's one of the beautiful things about you just sharing what you have seen. The minute you do, you're in that consciousness. As long as you're not doing it as a technique, okay? You just truly see this is where you're going to share from. You're in it. And so in there, you've got the power to wake somebody up or somebody to wake up. They're not waking up to your words, they're waking up to your feeling. The other piece is when you share what you know, it's not so much about just sharing what you know, it's being ready to then share the next thing. it's not like you're going to share what you've seen and then somebody's going to go, oh yeah, thank you, and then you don't have to share anything more. You're going to have to come up with what's next. You will. That happened to me the first time I went back to my clinic. After the night when I had this insight I was sharing with you. And what I was sharing with my first client was, I just laid the groundwork. I said, I just really saw something and I think it'll be really helpful. It's not anything what we've been working in. Do you want to hear it? And she said, sure. And I said, well, here's what I saw. Thought create your feeling. I was in it. I was in what I saw. She said, okay, thought creates your feeling. Yeah. She said, so then she says, well, what else? You see? So if I'm trying to imitate someone, you get it? I'm not in that place of consciousness that will guide me.
Mm.
You get it? I'm going to be lost because okay, what does Dick Bettinger say next? But when you're in the consciousness of the feeling of your understanding, you will just know where to go next because that's part of what I'm calling listening. You're in that feeling. So when she said that, I said, oh my God, I don't know, but and this just came to me because I was still in the feeling. I said, well, maybe if we talk about what it means for both of us, we'll get somewhere. What do you think thought creates your feelings means? And here we were. Now we're in a conversation together, connected, and we're going to find something more to say. So if you try to be somebody else in the three principles world, you don't get this beauty of the guidance of wisdom. So that's the other piece about why it's so valuable to share what you know and live in that with your coaching clients. Because what happens is when you live in there, you'll see more. By the end of that first session, I had seen more. And by the end of the day of 7 hours of, in those days I was doing therapy work, at the end of 7 hours, I just saw a lot more. That's how it's geared up. Sydney Banks talks about it like, you want to share what you know because then it opens up room for more. He uses the image of, if you have a full wine bottle, you can't put any more wine in it. But if you empty it, you can pour some more in. So those are the 2 points about sharing what you know that I think are very valuable.
And you kind of, I might be misquoting Sid here, but I don't know if Sid said this or I don't know if Elsie was telling a story about Sid, but I'm sure Sid once, someone asked him about getting qualified in sharing the principles, and he said, you don't need a qualification. Your insight is your qualification. And that kind of really comes back to what you were saying, because if Sid was saying your insight is your qualification, then surely what you're teaching is your insight. That's what you've got to share. And
that yes. Yeah, it's like, well, that's a beautiful thing. I've never heard that, but that's a beautiful thing. It's really true. Your qualifications to be a three principles coach really is your insights. Your insights. I mean, there's ways to kind of take a look at how to go about it that might make you, I don't know, more impactful, certainly trying to share with rapport would be a good thing to do, but I don't know. So I think there have been times when people have said something from their insight without rapport and it's hit people. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful quote. And see, here's the thing. It doesn't matter how little you know. Don't even think about it like that, because the minute you start sharing, you're going to see more. I mean, I want you all to be thrilled. I don't want you to be limited by comparing yourselves to other people, because in the early days, in the very, very beginnings, when there wasn't any three principles structure around, there wasn't anything around, we were thrilled. We didn't care. We just gave it a shot, and then we learned from it. You see, now there's too much to compare yourselves to. So I want for you the same kind of thrill, because that's where creation takes place. Creation takes place in that thrill, not in, oh my God, I didn't do it quite as well as Elsie, or how am I ever going to be like her? Yeah, so that's the power there of you'll always going to see more whenever you share. And so if you're thrilled, you're going to just see more and more. You just keep at it. Now, one other piece. Here's the other piece. This is why rapport is so valuable, because in rapport, you have permission to share what you know. That's so valuable, because you want to really look at whether you have permission to share what you know. So many times in our coaching practice, it's implied, right? People have hired you as a coach, so it's kind of implied that you've got permission to share something, about what you've seen. But sometimes outside of a coaching structure, you may be asked about what you know. Make sure that you've got their permission to share something. I'll tell you a story about that. My brother-in-law used to, he had a deep insight about the principles, a very spiritual insight about the principles. And every time we have like family gatherings for the holidays, he's always trying to share that. But he doesn't have the permission of the family to share that. So everybody's trying to excuse themselves whenever he shares that. So I just wanted to add that, there's a really important permission piece for you to share something about your insights.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. It's it's something that I learned a few years ago, and I did for people who are watching this interview, I do daily videos, and one of the daily videos was about asking permission. And I heard you use it in one of your examples where you came back from having this big insight. You said, I've seen something about, the human experience. Do you mind if I share it with you? And I find that it is so powerful, and I didn't do that before. And again, it was one of those things that when I started to ask permission, immediate changes in my impact with other people, because it's a lot more, it gives people a choice. And I think, I don't know how you feel about this, Mark, but I certainly feel that if we are asking permission, it's not a technique, it's genuine, and we've got to be okay with people saying, no, I don't give you permission. And most of the time when I ask permission, I get a yes, but actually sometimes people say no, I'm okay, or I just want some space. And I think it's important for us to respect that. It's got to be really asking for permission. And if someone's saying no, it's not a case of, well, I asked, or I need to find another way around it. It's trusting their wisdom.
No, that's a great point, and it's like you've got to honor where people are at, But again, that moves you then to a listening piece. That's a listening piece, So it could be that as you drop into listening, it's like, oh, okay. Or it might be, well, then usually for me, then it's like, well, and genuine. I'm not at all judgmental at all. It's not coming from that. I'll just say, okay, so what can we talk about? What would you like to talk about? See, so again, it drops into a listening piece. So you share, you say something. Do you want to hear this? Now you listen to the answer. Is there anything more important to you right now? Or, oh no, I just need space. Okay, well, let's get some space. Whatever it is, see, you want to listen to that so you get guided to help the person with whatever it is they're trying to share with you, which is, no, I don't want to hear that right now. Okay, well then what would be helpful? Or what would you like right now? So it's listening, rapport combined all the time. Underneath, you're sharing what you know.
Do you also share what you don't know? Because one thing that I saw that a lot of principles teachers did when I first started learning was emphasize the fact that they didn't see it all of the time. And that's what I find really different with the principles compared to other things that I learned. I spent a lot of time in the self-development community, and people are always telling me about this technique or this thing. This is the way. This will fix you. This will change your life. They never told you about when it didn't work. Whereas with the principles, I would hear principles practitioners saying, "Well, this is how the principles work," and I get caught out. I don't see it, and I found as important as sharing what we know is sharing the fact that we're all human and we get caught out. And again, you talked about this earlier about not being experts.
So, yeah, I think that's kind of like what I mean by being human. I don't really see it as something. I mean, you can consider that. I mean, when people talk about it, sometimes I'll share, well, I'm the same. It happens to me too. I'm in this human condition, and but I don't leave it there. I mean, again, it sounds like strategies, but these are just things that have come to me as I've been listening. I'll say, "Oh my God, that's happened to me as well. I get caught up in my thinking like that." But then, it occurs to me. I mean, like I've done it on, if you watched any of the videos I have out there, particularly the ones where I did those events with Michael Neal, you'll see that I'll say something like, I'll say that in the session that I got caught up in that, but then it occurs to me. See, I'll let people know I'm human, but I'll also let people know what's the value of the principles. In that, even though I do get caught up, it does occur to me that thought is creating this experience. At some point along the way of my moment of being caught up, I'll remember what's going on. And so that's kind of what I see happening for me when I share the principles or share where, I'm in the human condition too. I don't leave it with that. I also share with them that, I do remember, or it occurs to me that, where this feeling has come from or where this experience has come from. And then I check back. This is me now. You'll find your own way. But I check back after that. I said, was that helpful? Did that make sense to you? Tell me more of what you heard. So that helps me guide the teaching even more precisely.
No, that's a really good point. Thank you for kind of making that even clearer as well. Um, One thing you said is that you were sharing the principles, I guess, 7 hours a day, and you've also talked about sharing what you know, and we've talked about that a lot. I'm a really big believer in just going out and sharing, and I really try and encourage people online, on Facebook and stuff, to just find anyone that needs help that the principles could impact, and just start sharing. Just start sharing as best you can, as best as you know. How valuable do you think it is for people just to go out and get experience rather than I see a lot of people going on courses and waiting to be ready before they start sharing.
Well, I think that I agree with what you're saying. I support that wholeheartedly, that particularly if you want to build a practice, coaching practice or whatever with the principles, you got to get out and share them. And, one of the ways I did it initially was to give talks in the community. And I don't care, again, it's a learning experience. It's just like this, you're just learning how you can find your voice to share where you are able to talk to people about the principles. So, it's not like you're ever feeling like you're going to be ready. But once you get there and you get into that conscious space of what you want to share, you're ready. You'll know you're ready. But thinking ahead of time, you never feel ready. It's like, we're all faced with the unknown and we fill it with our usual ways of thinking. So getting out there and talk is the best way for you to start learning more about how to share. But also, it's a way for people to start to know about you. Again, if you're going to get out there and share, don't forget that you want to start with the rapport. So whoever you're sharing to, you want to make sure you have rapport before you start. That's going to be valuable. But yeah, if you want to build something or start something, that's one of the best ways to go about it. Because there's so much going for you. People want to hear this, even though they may not know, but they do want to hear this. And as you give your first talk, you're going to learn a ton, and you're going to be in a better shape for your second talk. Yeah, don't sit on it. Find some way that you're sharing it, but again, with permission.
I think that's a really good point, and it's kind of a really nice segue into, we've talked a lot about one-on-one coaching, one-on-one client work, but actually these two pieces, or all the things we've talked about, listening, rapport, sharing what you know, has been really, really helpful for me in talks, whether they've been half an hour talks, or early this year I gave kind of two-hour talks back to back at a seminar where there were other speakers. And again, it was an extraordinarily helpful to me to feel the rapport of the room where everyone was, and listen to what they were thinking, and then just talk about my experience in that talk, because I felt previously when I'd try and share what the principles are, especially with a group of people, they'd all go up in their heads and get intellectual. Whereas when I said, well, this is who I was before, this has been my experience, this is what happened, it's a lot harder for people to argue with. Well, they can't argue with your experience. It's your experience. And in sharing that, I found that people got impacted by it. Every time since then that I've given a talk.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think that you're right about that, and I think that's a nice thing you saw for yourself about how to present the principles in a group. Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and I think again, the deeper you can be in the feeling for what you want to say, in the honest human feeling of what you want to say. That's kind of like where you're coming from. This is what I've seen. You're very, very honest about it. Other people might say it another way, but you're in that feeling for what you say. People won't argue with it. Unless somebody's like really wants to fight anything, well then you just have to write that off. But really, if you're truly in the feeling for what you want to say honestly, it'll come out in a way that people will be accepting of it. You found the way to do it. That's a beautiful way to do it. I talk about myself a lot too, only I don't know, I've had a lot of stories of making mistakes. So, it's like, but, it's not really about me. You see, that's the thing about it. It's not about me. It's just coming up from the feeling I'm in. So people don't really care so much about the story about me. They just can hear the point of what I'm trying to point to. It's getting to where I may need to stop for this round.
I was just about to say, I think we're getting to that stage. Is there any final words you want to share? You've got a captive audience of, group of new people, or fairly, I guess, mixture of people who are sharing the principles. People are wanting to build their practice. Anything you want to just share? I think what you said so far has been great.
Well, again, I just have a really deep feeling for all of you wanting to get a practice in the principles and do something with the principles. And, I don't have parting words. I wish I had parting words. It's just that I really love the feeling of what you want to do for the world. And I think being of service and being comfortable with what you have to say. We talked about really sharing the understanding. And I think that staying with this Facebook group will help you with the particulars. There are particulars to get out and get some visibility. I think that was one of the things I learned too, is the value of visibility and doing things to let people know I'm around. And there have been magical things happen, but I think the visibility, my working at visibility, made things happen. And just as an example, one of the things I was kind of came up in a business coach that I was working with was the teleseminars I do once a month as a way to let people know I'm around, as and also to provide this uh, what is it? This feeling I wanted to tell people more about the principles. And so, working with my business coach, she said, "Why don't you look at some way to do webinars?" Well, the webinars were really become these teleseminars. And I'm surprised at how many people know about them and know of me that I have never met in person, that I see at conferences and thank me for putting them on. So they came from my heart, but they also served a way for people to know me. So you'll find your way. That's important. I think that's important, as well as all of these areas we've talked about around the consciousness you want to be in when you share the principles. So I really love all of you wanting to go forward. And I want you to be thrilled. I want you to feel thrilled. And the way to feel thrilled is just not to think about comparing yourself to anybody. Just go tell people what you've seen. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. And if we had more time, we'd carry on. Maybe we can interview you again. So thank you so much for that. And I love the fact that almost as we're finishing, the fact that you mentioned that you had your own coach is something that I've been sharing with people as well. That was one thing that changed things for me around being more prosperous. So fantastic interview, lots of great gold in there. And I'm sure we'd love to have you on again. And I'm going to add you to the group as well.
Oh, great. Wonderful. I'd love to be part of the group. I'd love to come back. And Ankush, thank you so much for inviting me. I love being able to be part of this and to support you. I love what you're doing.
Thanks, Mark.